In today's video, we'll take a look at the splice array method, not to be confused with slice. We have made a video about slice, which you can check up top, and I suggest you do because I'm going to make some references to it. So let's get started. How can we use this? Well, it's very simple. First, to call it, you just say array.splice, and this guy takes in at least three parameters. So the first one is the start index. So where do you want to do the operations, right? Let's say we want to do the operations and at the index 1. We want to do something here, right? We want to either add or remove elements. Because as we'll see, we can both remove and add elements using the splice array method. So I'm going to pass in here just 1. Simple enough. The second parameter is the amount of elements that it should remove from that index onwards, right? So I have index 1 and I can tell it to, well, I want to remove 2 elements and it's going to remove them. So if I say here 1 and 2 as a delete count, and if we actually execute this, you'll notice, yeah. So we removed 2 elements from the index 1. We removed both 90 and 210. Remember when we tested with slice the same thing? It didn't change the initial array. But splice, in this case, does change it, and it does only operations with that initial array. You're not actually going to get a copy that represents the sort of image of the array after the operations, right? So it does it on there. Now, aside from removing elements, right, we can remove basically any element from any index and however many elements from that index. That's really nice. We can specify here, for example, 3, and it's going to remove everything from there onwards. We're just going to get the first element left, right? Or we can even specify 0 and then 4, and that's going to remove all the elements. So if we run this, you'll notice I get an empty array. That's expected because what happened here? We told it to do the operations at the first index, at index 0, so that's here, and remove 4 elements. And well, our array has 4 elements, so it's just going to remove all the elements. That's it. And now our array is empty. Now the interesting part about splice is that you can also add elements to it. So if we specify from the second parameter onwards, so the third, fourth, and fifth, if we specify elements, it's going to add them at the specified index. So if I, for example, say here, I want to add the number 17 here. What's going to happen? What do you think is going to happen? I'm going to run this, and you'll notice I get an array with 17. So we removed 4 elements from the index 0. So I removed all of them. And then at index 0, it automatically added 17 there. I can specify, for example, just 1 here. So what do you think is going to happen after I change this to a 1? Think about it for a second. So you might have noticed that if we actually run this, the first element got replaced by 17, which is quite nice. That means that using the splice array method, we can actually replace elements, not only just add or remove, whatever, we can even replace them. Because the index that we pass is used both for removing and adding. And since we first removed the one element at index 0, which is 16, and then we added 1 element at index 0, which is 17, we actually got an array that instead of 16 has 17 now, right? And we can actually do this for as many elements as we want. We can say here 2, and then we can pass in here 80, let's say. And if I run this now, guess what's going to happen? We're going to have an array with first 2 elements actually replaced by 17 and 80, right? Instead of 16 and 90, we get 17 and 80. And this delete count actually doesn't even restrict the amount of items you add. I can say here 1, and I can still pass in 2 arguments here to actually be added to an array, and it's going to work just fine. If I launch this, you'll notice I now have 5 elements inside our array. Basically, we didn't just replace 1 element, we also added 1. So we removed 16 because 16 is at index 0, and we added 17 and 80 right at index 0. So this is amazing. Basically, we can add, remove, and replace elements at a given index using just this one array method. It's very simple. Okay, but what if we want to actually change the end of the array? What if we want to replace the last element, not the first, with something else? Do you have to use pop and push for that? Not quite, no. You can actually use splice for that. Now, here we can, for example, let's replace 20 with 21. So you can say here, instead of this, I'm gonna add 21. We're gonna remove one element because we want to remove just 20. And we want to do all the operations at the last index of the array. That means what? Array.length -1, right? So that's going to be our index. Array.length -1 is going to be 4, in our case, -1, which is 3. And what's at index 3? Well, this is 0, this is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. And there you go. If I launch this now, you'll notice I got the element 20 replaced by the element 21. So it did work. But here's a really neat trick. Instead of passing only positive numbers as indices as the first parameter, you can actually pass in negatives as many other array methods we've seen before. So instead of passing array.length -1 and specifying array again inside the same call, you can actually just pass in -1. So -1 is going to be the same as array.length -1. So if I launch this, you'll notice the same exact behavior, because negative indices look at the end of the array and say, okay, well, give me the first element from the end of the array. So it's going to give us 20. Right, so this is how this negative index thing can be really, really useful. One neat thing that you can do using the splice array method is, if you have, for example, 2 arrays, right, and you want the second array to sort of replace the elements inside the first array, right? So let's say I want, inside our array here, I want these 3 elements to be here, right? How can you do that with a single splice call? It's very simple. So we have to think about where the operations are going to occur. Well, in our case, if I want from the start of the array to actually replace them, I'm gonna pass in here, well, 0, because that's the start of the array. Next is, how many elements do we want to remove? Well, from the initial array, we want to remove all these 3, or however many are inside the second array. So I'm gonna pass in the second array's length. Cool. And then what do we pass in as the third parameter? Like, what exactly should we pass in here? Well, using this structuring, you can pass in all the elements as if they were passed using a comma. So as a collection, you can just basically add them all together, and there's that. So not array 2 here, because that's just going to add the array inside our array, which we're going to get to nested arrays. We want the structure our array 2. And if I now run this, you'll notice the first 3 elements of the array got replaced with the first 3 elements of our second array, right? If we were to not destructure it, you'll notice we're not gonna get the exact same result. We get an array inside the array. That's why I was talking that you have to actually pass in the destructuring of the second array, right? This, I think it can be useful in some cases. And one last feature of the splice array method is what it returns. We haven't talked about that yet. So let's say we have here the result, and that's going to be the result of splice. And if we console log this, say that result, I'm gonna also destructure this so that it works properly now. If I run this, you'll notice the second print, this guy, is actually all the elements that got removed. So as the result, splice will also return an array with all the elements that it removed, because, well, that's very useful if you want to do anything else with those elements, right? So yeah, sure, you just replace them, but maybe you want to do some post-processing with it. Well, now you know exactly what you replaced, and you don't have to calculate your own replacement and actually do another slice of it, so that you know, okay, well, so you don't have to do something like array.slice of 0 and array2.length, right? It automatically does that for you and returns the basically the elements that got removed. And that's about it with the splice array method. I hope you got something out of this video. I hope you understand the difference now between splice and slice, and that one is actually removing or adding elements to it, or the other one doesn't actually change the initial array, only copies part of the array. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.